Now, as I was preparing for this week's message, I came across a quote by Joan Didion that I thought could kind of frame today's passage pretty well. She says, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live. We interpret what we see, select the most workable of the multiple choices. We live entirely by the imposition of a narrative line upon disparate images, by the ideas with which we have learned to freeze the shifting phantasmagoria which is our actual experience." Now, what is this quote saying? It's saying we make meaning of our lives by the stories that we tell ourselves. Because a lot of times, to be honest, our lives just feel like these events that happen to us that don't seem to have any relation to one another. It seems as though we are drifting in the sea, and the winds that carry us to unknown places for reasons that are completely unknown to us. And that's why Joan Didion says the reason why we tell ourselves stories is because we need to make sense of our lives. We need to know that we have meaning and purpose. And so the stories that we tell tend to drive our lives, give us meaning and purpose. Some of us are children of immigrants, and maybe that is a storyline of your life. Maybe others of us see ourselves as living out a tale of self-made success, right? Overcoming the obstacles of the trauma that we may have experienced as children. Right? There are all these kinds of stories that we tell. The religious amongst us may say, look, I don't go by any of those narratives. The story that drives me is as a follower of God. And so everything that happens to me, everything that I embark on, I'm going to interpret my life through the lens of that story that I like to tell myself. We are meaning-making creatures, and therefore we are storytelling creatures. Because stories connect the dots of our lives between seemingly random events. Now, this ministry year, we're calling our ministry year theme, Comfort in Surrender. Comfort and surrender. And part of what that means is to surrender the story of our lives. Surrender the authorship of the story that we tell about who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. And what the promise of Christianity tells us is that as we do so, there's comfort to be found there in knowing that there's an author that is writing our story that is a far greater writer than we could ever be, and has the ability to imbue meaning and purpose into our lives, which we would not have ever dreamed of discovering for ourselves. And especially as he weaves the individual storyline of our lives into the greater storyline of the gospel that he's writing for all of cosmos, that is where you will find meaning and purpose of your life. And so with that being said, what I'd like to do today is to look at this passage through the lens of this classic storyline of the ages that's been etched into every single human heart. Writer and professor named Kurt Vonnegut calls this man in whole. So if you could pull up that slide. So I want to look at our passage through three headings: our destiny, our enemy, and our victory. Our destiny, our enemy, and victory. So every story starts off like this. This is where we are meant to be. Things are honky-dory, things are going well, and we find ourselves, man in whole? Because of the work of the enemy, through unfortunate circumstances. But then every great story, there is a redemption at the end, right? Our destiny, our enemy, and our victory. So let's go through these three things. First, our destiny. Now, I want to spend most of the time that we have together on this point, because what I'm about to bring to you, I imagine, especially for those of us that grown up in church, this is probably a concept that is the most foreign to many of us. And so for this point, I want us to look at the first part of that passage here, verses 5 to the first part of verse 8. Now, the Hebrew writer makes this point, and then he goes on to quote Psalm 8. Right, this passage that was just read to you and was read to you in the beginning of our service during call to worship. And the psalmist, as he is writing this, he is in wonder. He is moved to wonder when he looks at humanity. Right, he says, "What is man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? And then he goes on to say, you made him for a little while lower than the angels. And then he says, you have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. Now, here's what the Hebrews writer is telling us about what our destiny is as he's borrowing from the psalmist in Psalm 8. He's saying the wonder of humanity is that the world to come has been subjected to, not to angels, not to these heavenly beings, but to humanity. It's saying all of what you see out in the world, all of the universe, your destiny is to rule and have dominion over all of it. This is a story of our past. If you look at Genesis 2:15, it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden to work it and keep it. That's the way it was meant to be. But not only that, it's telling us, and I'm spoiling the ending for you, but this is the story of our future. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. The Apostle Paul, he, in this context, is rebuking Christians who were involved in kind of litigations with one another over petty matters. But here's how he rebukes them. It says, do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life? The Apostle Paul is saying, how can you not settle trivial matters amongst yourselves? Do you not understand that the purpose of your life, the end goal, the destiny of who you are is you are going to rule over the cosmos. In fact, you are going to judge the affairs of heavenly beings. The purpose of humanity as it is told to us in the Bible is that you and I, we were created to rule as God's vice regents, as managers over the cosmos, if you will. Now, I want to pause here real quickly and talk about it a little bit because I think some of you are going to need to wake up and to start thinking about this, because I take it that for many, many of you, this is not something that you've thought of in terms of what you were created to be. You know, for those of you that are managers, you know that one of the most important skills that a manager can have is the ability to delegate your work to those that are reporting to you. Right? Delegation is an important skill to have as a manager. But here's the worst thing that can happen to a manager, is that your direct reports start delegating their work upward to you. Right? You start taking up their work, whether it's through their incompetence or what have you, and you start taking on the kind of work that they ought to be doing. Here's what's happening in the Bible. God is looking out at the cosmos and all of its wonder. It's all of its valleys and their mountains and the seas and the oceans and the stars and the planets and the galaxies. And he's looking at all of that and saying, I am putting you in charge over all of this. That is your job and not mine. That is why I created you. I wonder if this is a wonder to you. For some of us, we can't even get our pets to go to the bathroom in the right place. And yet God is looking to you and me and saying, I am putting you in charge of the entire universe. Now, what does this mean? I want to tease out some of the implications of it. I want to just mention two things. If you are to understand that this is your destiny, this is the purpose for which God has made you, the first thing that it should happen is it should rewrite how we view success. I was talking to a church planter last week. He's starting a church in Hackensack, and one of the things that he and I shared is that we both used to do ministry in New York City, and now we find ourselves in New Jersey. And one of the things that he said to me that was really interesting is, look, New York City is filled with people that are trying to make it, trying to achieve success. in whatever field that they find themselves in. But what makes northern New Jersey a little bit different is that northern New Jersey is filled with people that have already made it. Of course, not everyone for sure. But nevertheless, he says, northern New Jersey is filled with people. They had their life in the city, trying to make it. But once they do, once they make a life for themselves, what do? They come out to northern New Jersey and they settle down. Did you know that Alicia Keys, great singer, you know that song, Empire State of Mind? New York, New York. You know, she wrote that song in Edgewater, New Jersey at her home studio. Cardi B. You know, Cardi B lives literally 5 minutes away from our church. Now don't go Googling her address, okay? I don't want joy people harassing her. Right? This is what happens, right? People in New York City are striving after whatever definition of success they have, and once they achieve it, they come out to New Jersey. This is a place where people come to settle. And I know that there's a lot of us that, for those of us, that's not true. But nevertheless, that is kind of the standard, the air that we breathe for those of us that are here in northern New Jersey. And here's what I want to say. I know that there are many of you that are here for whom this story is true. And for those of you that have experienced success, here's what many people tend to do, okay? One of a couple of things. People that have achieved this level of success to be able to settle in a place like Bergen County, they a lot of times tend to rest on their laurels. And so what happens is life starts to get boring for people like that. Or there are those of us that have achieved a certain level of success and have settled out here, but we're still stressed out because we have to now maintain that level of success. Or we want to pass that success down to the next generation. We are obsessed with our children achieving the same level of success that we have, or even better than us. Friends, here's what I want to say. If this describes you, I want you to know this. All of what you've achieved in your entire life, all of your accomplishments, everything that you're proud to display on your resume will be like dust. Like dust compared to what's in store for you. You live your life thinking that you're on top of the world and you've done this or that. Do you realize you keep that mindset? Do you realize you're going to be embarrassed when you stand before God in the new heavens and the new earth and God goes, here's the cosmos. I want you to rule over it. Friends, for those of you that have achieved success in life, I want you to know that there's much more work to be done. Much more work to be done than providing a good life for yourself or your family. No, the work that God wants to give you is for you to work hard to provide a good life for the cosmos. Start with the neighbors around you. Start with the community around you. God has greater work for you. Psalmist in Psalm 8, he's moved by the Holy Spirit. This is a reason why he looks to humanity and is marveling at humanity. Because God created you with far greater aspirations than what you've settled on in your life. There's much more work to be done, and the work will not stop until God's kingdom comes here on earth as it is in heaven. And that's the kind of work that God wants to give to you now. You dare not be bored as a Christian. There's work to be done. But I know there's many of us that feel exactly the opposite. We don't feel that way. We feel stuck in our careers. We feel like we had our careers taken away from us. We've experienced a ton of failures and hardship, right? We have regrets over our life as we look back because our life didn't turn out the way we wanted to. And here's the most dangerous thing that you can do if you're experiencing this for yourself. The most dangerous thing that you can do, and it's so easy to do here in our neck of the woods, is to compare yourself with others. Compare yourself with others. Now, if you're experiencing that right now, let me tell you, likewise, I want you to know that in the new heavens and the new earth, you're going to take a look at the things that you wanted for yourself. the standard that you use to measure yourself with others, and you're going to be absolutely embarrassed. When likewise God hands you the cosmos and saying, do you not realize all that you've experienced in this life was training ground for what I had in store for you? Do you not realize that what I'm doing in you right now is trying to teach you and give you wisdom and perspective that you otherwise would not have had? Because I am preparing you for something far greater in this life and in the life to come. Friends, this life is just a training ground. There's eternity of endless flourishing that is waiting for you. But for far too many of us, we have our eyes closed to that reality. When God created us for so much more, that's your destiny. To have a far greater vision for your meaning and purpose than what you've settled on. So that what that's meant to do is rewire the way you think about your success. But secondly, understanding this is meant to rewire how you and I view work. Because if this is training ground for the new heavens and the new earth, it has immediate implications for the way you view your work. And I want to give you a vision for your Monday through Saturday or whatever your work week looks like. Because do you realize, like, so much of our work and our job is about minimizing risk and loss. Minimizing risk and loss, because that is the reality that we live in. But here's the thing. What if, do this little thought exercise with me. What if you had the universe and all of its resources at your disposal? And what if you had the guarantee that the fate of the universe was not towards decay, but only towards greater and greater degrees of flourishing that will never end? What if you had that guarantee? What would your job look like? And I had to think of this for myself, because I was told in the past, like, there are only two kinds of people that will be out of a job in the new heavens and the new earth. You know what they are? I was told. Doctors and pastors. Like, I'm going to be jobless. But I want to tell you, that is not biblical. It's not. Think of it this way. Let's say, for those of you that are in the field of investing, right? What if you had all the capital in the entire universe? And what if you didn't have to manage risk and you had all the capital in the world to be able to invest into 1 trillion different endeavors that will only add to the flourishing of the world? That's what you'll be doing. And God's going to go to you and be like, hey, go nuts. Go nuts. What if you're a physician? This boggles my mind to think about it. What if you lived in a world with no sickness, no death? And what if all that was left was only the continual flourishing of the human body? What would your job look like? What would your job look like if you were given stewardship over the study of the human anatomy and in all of its glory? And you can only add to the flourishing of this human body. You know, there's a concept that's floating around in modern culture called transhumanism. Do you guys know about this? It's meant for, it was usually meant for the hyper rich, for them to freeze their bodies and to live forever, and those kinds of things. But it's kind of bleeding its way down to popular culture, right? That's where we get all these fads when it comes to diet, right? Different kinds of exercising and mindful meditation and stuff like that. All of that is an effort to achieve that which awaits us at the end of time. Now, there's danger there for sure. But I think we're seeing glimmers of what we were made to be. And what if, as a physician, the only thing that was left for you was to add on to that, to add to the flourishing? And you had a role to play in that. For those of you who are parents, what if the vision for the way in which you parent your child wasn't just keeping your child from trouble or inheriting the success that you may have had? But what if the vision for your child was only about realizing to greater and greater degree the potential that God has placed in them in the here and now? And the only thing that you can do is add to their flourishing. How would your parenthood look different? Friends, here's what I want to say. This is not just an interesting thought exercise. I want you to understand that you are kingdom people. You are different from the world. And unless you have this kingdom as your North Star, the new heavens and the new earth as the North Star in your work, you're always going to be limited. You're always going to settle. Psalm 8 tells us that human beings are crowned with glory and honor. You and I are going to be the ones that preside over the cosmos. Human beings are going to be the ones that judge over the angels and over the human being, or over heavenly beings. That is why human beings were created to aspire to greatness. That's why there are no limits to human ambitions. Right? I understand there's great danger in having all of this ambition. And for those of us that grew up in conservative culture, right, we are taught to fear our ambitions or consider it evil by nature. But what if it was God placing his mark on you? Do you ever think about why human beings are so obsessed with going to moon first and then going to Mars? There's like this arm race about getting to Mars. Why? Yes, there's some practical considerations behind that, but at the end of the day, that's where human aspirations lie, because we were made to rule over not just the earth, but the cosmos. And friends, I want you to understand, every single person here in this room, you are not the exception. That is your destiny. God is going to hand the cosmos over to you. How will that affect your life today now? That's your destiny. But secondly, we do have an enemy. And we have very little time, so I'm going to see if I can fly through this. After quoting Psalm 8, what does the Hebrews writer say? He starts out the second part of verse 8. He says, "At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him." And then in verse 14 and 15, we are told the reason as to why we have not manifested this destiny. We're told that it is the devil who holds the power of death. And he dangles the fear of death over us at every moment of our lives. Now, for many of us, we feel very uncomfortable talking about the devil. It's this supernatural force that is out there. And even the religious amongst us that consider ourselves to be kind of spiritually aware and sensitive, we would look at different circumstances of our lives and say, oh, that is the devil. But for both of us, whatever camp you fall in, I don't think we understand the extent to which the devil exercises his power over humanity. And if there is a supernatural God, and if you can believe in that, you better believe that there's other supernatural beings that are possibly existing and working. And here's how the devil works. Let me just give you an illustration here. Irvin Yalom, who's a secular psychiatrist who wrote a book about the fear of death. Obviously, he comes from an atheistic point of view. Quotes this poem of somebody who was experiencing death anxiety. And it just kind of stopped me in my tracks this week. It says, "Every day, annihilation looms. I try leaving traces that maybe matter. Engaging in the present the best I can do. But death lurks just beneath that protective facade whose comfort I cling to like a child's blanket. The blanket is permeable in the stillness of the night when the terror returns." Now, the whole poem's kind of startling, but there's one particular line that really just kind of stopped me in the tracks, where it says, "I try leaving traces that maybe matter." Friends, why are you and I so desperate for love? Why are you and I so desperate to achieve success? Why are we so quick to turn a blind eye towards justice or towards injustice as long as it doesn't affect me? Why are we so okay with our entire society trampling on one another if it means that we get to the next level? Why? It's because we are so desperate to leave traces behind. It's our grasping after the straws of immortality. That's why so many of us, even though we are Christians, we know that the best thing that we can leave behind to our children is our faith. We don't do that. Why? Because we want to live forever through our children. That is a death anxiety that exists in every single one of our hearts. Now listen, the book's recommendation is, the book tells us this at the end of the book. It says, you know what? Don't look away from death. Specifically, it says, don't look away from that younger photograph of you. Right? For me, it comes in the form of Facebook memories, right? It says, don't look away from the younger photograph of you. And then it says, let the sweetness and the bitterness of what you had and what you lost sweep over you. And reading that, I was like, well, I mean, there is some kind of tragic, kind of realist beauty to what is being said there. But man, as a Christian and as an optimist at that, I said, that's still a tragedy, isn't it? The enemy still has the last say. Listen, you can use therapy, you can use psychology, you can use philosophy, you can use religious teachings to defeat every enemy that you have before you, but there's still that one tool of the enemy, the one trump card that the enemy has over us, and that is death. So what do we do about that? That's the last point. So our destiny, our victory, our destiny, our enemy, and lastly, our victory. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to give you the answer right away, okay? The victory comes through Jesus, who is our champion and our brother. Here's what I mean. If you look at the second half of verse 8, it tells us that at present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him, to humanity, okay? We have not manifested our destiny, but right after, what does it say in verse 9? But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, what? Namely, Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Here's what's happening. The Hebrews writer is rereading Psalm 8. And as all Christians should, he is rereading Psalm 8 through the lens of Jesus Christ. And he's realizing that actually Jesus is the one who is currently crowned with honor and glory. Why? Because of the suffering of death, because he tasted death for everyone. It's saying we haven't yet manifested our destiny, but in Jesus Christ, because he has gone through the pains of death, by trusting in him, that's when we can start to realize the destiny of our lives. How? Verse 10. It says, it was fitting that he, Jesus, for whom and by whom all things exist, and bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. Now, the word founder there in the Greek is archegos. And there's a commentator on the book of Hebrews by the name of William Lane who says perhaps a better translation for that word archegos is champion. Champion. Why? Because in ancient Greco-Roman literature, archegos was the word that was used to describe a divine hero who would come down to earth and fight the kind of battles that mere mortals like you and I could not fight. And here's the point that the Hebrews writer is trying to make here. He's telling us that we are currently held captive under the tyranny of the devil, over the fear of death. And yet what the Hebrews writer is telling us is that Jesus Christ is the champion of salvation who wrestled death into the grave. But more than that, through his death, in his resurrection, what we are told, verse 14, is that he destroyed the devil. And verse 15, delivered all those who were subject to lifelong slavery. This is Jesus we are talking about here. When you look to Jesus on the cross, what you're seeing is that you're seeing the kind of Savior who went through the pains of death, who came out the other side victorious, and tells you the way he told the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, is that fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one, not dead, the living one. I died, And behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. There's victory in your champion. I'm just going to have to finish with this. There are those of you that are listening in right now that need to see Jesus as your champion, who holds the keys of death and Hades. Many of you are experiencing death in your life. Your life has not gone the way you thought it should have gone. Others of you have experienced success and you're feeling empty, asking, what is next for me? And for all of us, we need to understand that death is not the end. It is only the beginning. And whatever we are experiencing in this life is training ground for what is far more glorious than we can imagine for ourselves. And we cannot make it through with our own imagination, with our own efforts. That is why you have a champion in Jesus who punched a hole through death and said, if you were to come with me, let me lead you. That is a story that he is writing for your life. Friends, your aspirations, your greatest dreams and visions for your life and for your community, I dare say it's way too small. Your destiny is to have the world under your feet. And especially for those of you that feels like it's the other way around, you have the whole world collapsing on you. You need to stop letting the enemy have his way with you. You need to turn to Jesus, your champion, and let him take you by the hand to victory.